Hello, Owls. So it's Tuesday, although it's actually Monday night for me, but for you guys, it'll be Tuesday when you see this. We're going to be learning about ratio and scale factors. Both of these words you've heard before, and we did talk a tiny little bit about ratio today, particularly Annalie, who remembered what it was all about in relation to proportion. So let's start off with ratio. Okay, now ratio is quite simple. Basically, all you need to do is say what you see. Let me show an example. Okay, so we have the TV company called Earth TV, and they decide on their TV schedule and they think about the ratio of their TV programs. So they have films, documentaries, and sport, and they divide up the time in a ratio of 2 to 1 to 3. And this is between the hours of 12 p.m, so lunchtime, and 6 p.m, which is a total of 6 hours. So the first thing I need to think about is, what is my total if I add up the ratio of films to documentaries to sport? Well, I know that my calculation will end up being 2 add 1 add 3, which gives me, I'm going to give you a few seconds on your whiteboards to write it down. Hold them up. That's right, 6. Now, if my total, which I'm going to write here, is 6, I now need to think about how many hours of TV I've got. So I've got 6 hours of TV. So I'm going to just rub out my little calculation here. Obviously at school, you're not going to use your fingers. I'm going to write my 6 hours here. So it's now very simple. I need to work out, just like yesterday with our proportion, what is my multiplying factor here. So my multiplier, 6 times what is 6? Well, it's 1. So then I have to do sport times the same multiplier, which gives me 3. So I know that there are 3 hours of sport. My documentaries, 1 times 1 is 1. And 2 times 1 is 2. Now that I've got my hours at the bottom, I need to again just check. So 2 hours plus 1 hour plus 3 hours gives me 6 hours. So I've used the ratio of 2 to 1 to 3 to work out how many hours they dedicate to each programme. Okay, so we just looked then at what the average of TV programmes would be if it was 6 hours long. Most TV channels tend to run for 24 hours. So how are we going to work that out? Well, first of all, I'm going to write my 24 hours here, because if I remember from before, the ratio that I had was for 6 hours. What do I need to do now with this total, okay, to help me work out these bits here? I'm going to give you a few seconds on your whiteboards to copy out that table and to work out what you need to do here. Off you go. Okay, so what is the relationship between 6 and 24? Hopefully you have written down what the multiplier is. What is the multiplier? Miss Humphreys or Mrs. Bromley and myself will ask one of you now. Hopefully somebody told us 4. So because with all ratio and proportion, whatever you do to one aspect of the chart or the table that you're working with, you must continue and repeat it with all of the others. So what do I now need to do for sport, documentaries and films? Well, if my total is multiplied by 4, what is the multiplying factor for each of these? When you've worked it out, can you solve how many hours of sport, documentaries and films there would be in a 24-hour day? I'm going to give you 30 seconds to work it out. Okay, so hopefully somebody will be able to raise their hand and tell one of the adults how many hours of sport there will be. Yep, we multiply by 4 to give us 12 hours. Documentaries, what are we multiplying by? Okay, so what will the average of documentaries be? That's correct, 4 hours. And finally, films. What will our multiplier be? Thinking about what it was before to keep it the same. Yep, that's correct. It's going to be 8 hours. Now, our total's 24, so we're just going to do a little check. We're going to do 8, add 4, add 12, just to see what it totals. Well, I know that 8 add 4 is... That's right. And then we've got 12, which makes... Hopefully you've all got 24 hours. So can you see that by using that ratio 2 to 1 to 3, we work out the total of our ratio. We then work out what is the relationship between that initial ratio and the total number that you are given in hours, and think about what is that multiplier. Whatever that multiplier is, we then repeat with each of the columns to work out our hours. We then add them up to check we are correct. Okay, so our next question is all about shopping. And we're going to look now at the price of 4 apples. So I've been to the supermarket, I've bought 4 apples and they cost £1.80. Mrs. Bromley goes to the supermarket and buys 3 apples. She wants to know how much that is going to cost based on how much I have paid for my apples. So how do we do that? Well, I can draw out my apples. There's a little picture to help me. So I need 4 apples and I'm going to draw out my bar model again. And I know that my total price for 4 apples was £1.80. I'm going to draw the same bar of the same length underneath and I'm going to divide it up into 4 sections. These 4 sections are going to represent my 4 apples. Okay, so again, I'm going to draw them underneath. What calculation are we going to do to work out the cost of 1 apple? I'm going to give you a few minutes just to think about it and raise your hand and tell the adult. Okay, so hopefully you thought that our calculation is going to be £1.80 divided by 4 to work out the price of 1 apple. Remember, we use our bus stop method to solve this problem. So 4 goes into 1, no times. We haven't used it, so we carry the 1 over. 4 goes into 18, thinking in my 4 times table. If you've forgotten it, you can always write it out on the side. 12, 16, 20. 20's too far, 18's here. 1, 2, 3, 4 groups, with 2 remaining if I count on. 4 goes into 20 5 times. So I can see here now that £1.80 divided by 4 is 45p. Some of you will have been able to do this mentally by doing halving and halving again. So well done if you use that strategy. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to write 45 pence into each of my sections here on my bar model. Okay, because I know that one apple is going to cost 45p. So now that I've done that, how can I use this information to help me tell Mrs. Bromley how much 3 apples are going to cost? I'd like you on your whiteboard now to do the calculation to show me how you would solve that. Those of you that are working quickly, are there 2 different types of calculations you could use to show the value of 3 apples? I'm going to give you about 30 seconds. Remember, if 1 apple is 45 pence, what would 2 be? What would 3 be? What calculation did you use? Okay, I'd like somebody from both groups to share with the grown-up that they're working with. Can you explain how you worked out your answer? Okay, so the final thing that we're going to be looking at are scale factors. Now, a scale factor is quite straightforward because we've got this word factor here. Where have you heard the word factor before? I know it's a true fact that 3 times 4 is 12. Is that jogging any memories? It's a true fact that 5 times 5 is 25. It's a true fact that 11 times 7 is 77. What is a factor? And how can we use this in scale factors? Well, if I was to draw a square that is 2 centimetres by 2 centimetres, and I want to increase it by a scale factor of 3, I am basically going to be increasing the measurements by a scale factor of 3. That basically means multiplying the size by 3. So instead of having a 2 by 2, I know that 2 times 3 is 6. I'll end up with a 6 centimetre by 6 centimetre square. Okay, so that's if I increase by a scale factor of 3. If I decrease, that would therefore be the inverse or the opposite. So if I was to decrease by a scale factor of 3, I would actually be dividing the sides by 3, so creating the inverse. So 6 centimetres divided by 3 gives me my 2 centimetres. I hope that makes sense. It's now time for you to get on with your activities. If you have any problems, remember you can always go back onto your laptops and re-watch this video, or you can always ask the grown-ups in the room for help. If you're at home, you can always call school to speak to either myself, Mrs. Bromley or Miss Humphreys, whoever is in school, so that you can have some help if you are getting particularly stuck on your activity. Good luck. Bye.